Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is NiftyKeisha, and if it's your first time, I do a bunch of different things, but I focus a lot on natural hair and curly hair and yoga and a lot of different stuff. And if you like the content, please subscribe and also hit the notification button just so that you know when my next video comes up. And if you have been following me for a while, welcome back. Great to have you, great to see you. Today I'm going to be talking about how I cut my hair, sharing how I cut my hair, and this in a moment because I have shot this video so many times. This is the third time I'm shooting this video, and the first two times it kept coming out blurry. I was using my fancy camera and it kept going out of focus, so today I am using my iPhone because it never fails me. So I started cutting my hair myself because I used to go to stylists. I just really got tired of going to stylists, and I would tell them what I want, and every time I'd come home and end up having to fix it, especially on the bottom. Like, every person I've gone to in New York City, I swear to God, I ask them if they can give me a certain shape. And one, there's always this uniform style that they kind of give to everyone. They don't factor in your face or just, you know, the texture of your hair and how it might fall. And then on top of that, it's always what I call this glorified mullet, which is basically a mullet that is supposed to be a prettier mullet. Like, it's just really long on the bottom and then really short on the top. I've struggled with hair loss, so that didn't help at all either, but it just makes my hair look really thin. As you guys can see with the lights behind me, I mean, in a way it's making my hair look a little thinner than it actually is. I always struggle with the way my hair looks on camera because it always makes my hair look shorter than it is, and it also makes it look thinner than it is. So that the struggle is real in regard to that. But these lights behind me today are going to come in really handy because you'll be able to see, it'll help you to see how I cut my hair. Now, I am not a stylist. I have no training whatsoever when it comes to cutting hair. But if you're curious about cutting your hair yourself, today is just a bunch of things, basically tips on what I do and what has served me. I've been cutting my hair now for, it's going to be about maybe 9 months, and I am so happy. I don't have any problems. I cut my hair every 2 months. And that is because at one point I had cut it really short and I really liked that. So I wanted to keep my hair at a little bit of a shorter length. But I'm now slowly starting to grow it out. And what I'm noticing is, especially if you struggled with hair loss, video on that to come, you want to keep the ends as fresh as possible and not let yourself get any split ends. So as my hair has started to grow out, as I've been cutting it every 2 months, I've noticed that my hair just looks fuller, it looks healthier. So that's what's going on. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's get to it. So there's a couple things you're gonna need. First thing, you'll need kind of one of these jammies so that you can wrap just whatever, something around your shoulders so that your hair doesn't get all over your neck. And then the other thing is a pair of really good shears. So I've seen people talk about using kitchen shears or just like whatever scissors they have laying around the house. Yes, you could totally do that. No judgment if you want to do that. But if you're really committed to making sure that your hair is healthy, because like when we cut our hair, that's kind of really the intention, right? To regain shape, but also to keep our hair healthy. Shears that are not properly sharpened will contribute to the ends potentially splitting. So if you have split ends, you cut your hair and then you use bad shears and you end up with more split ends, it's kind of defeating the purpose. So you want to make sure that you're just making a little bit of an investment. They last forever. I've had these for, I think these are newer ones, but the ones that I had before lasted me a good 4 or 5 years. Granted, I just started cutting my hair much more religiously, but I'm pretty confident that these are going to last me at least 2 years. So the other things you're going to need is just like a hair tie or a couple, and you're going to need combs. You may also need a couple bobby pins, but we'll see. I don't know, sometimes I use them, sometimes I don't. So I've zoomed in a bit, and so the next thing I'm going to do is grab my scissors and just put them in here on my shirt. I am going to use the thinner comb for this for now. We'll see. But you see, I've already combed out my hair with the big wide tooth comb, and then I come back in with the smaller tooth comb in order to just to get it a little straighter. And then you see I'm smoothing it down. So there I can see exactly how much hair I'm trying to cut. And from here, I'm going to then take a look in this mirror and make sure that it's how much I want to cut, and then I'll show you what I do. For the hair on the bottom, I want to make sure that it's pretty much a straight line. Like, I'm not getting too crazy about layers here. This is as much as I'm cutting, right? I'm not doing much at all here. Just cutting just the ends. Now, if you guys are like me and you get fairy knots a lot, which are those little knots that you get in your hair, I like to take a look and see if I see any while I do this as well, because sometimes I'll just cut those individual ones as I see them. Fairy knots will contribute a lot to split ends because it causes the hair to break where it shouldn't, or just when it shouldn't. And so you just want to make sure that you catch those as you see them. So that's it. That was like barely anything that I just cut. I do this one side at a time because what it does is it gives me the baseline for where I'm cutting it all on the bottom. This is my starting point. And I use this as basically my diagram of where to go on the lower part of my hair. I'm gonna spritz this, about 3 sprays. And this, I love this because it's a fine mist spray. It's not very dense. You don't want huge droplets. You want just like a nice fine mist. The smaller chunks of hair that you choose is going to be easier to comb out, so you'll have a lot less issues in that regard, breakage, things like that you want to avoid. Just gonna comb out, once again, just the ends a little bit better with this fine tooth comb, and then take a look at the ends and measure them and see. So I didn't even wrap my shoulders. Actually, I need to do that. But we're here. So I see how much it is, and then I cut very, very, very little on this side. And this side, this part of this side isn't too much longer. But let me cover my shoulders. I'll be right back. Voila. This is gonna make me really warm. You have to be patient. You have to be very patient when you're doing this. So I'm going to take a look. It's about this much hair. I don't know why I always sound drunk when I record. I'm not drunk. I don't understand. You see what's going on here? It's really hard. This is the part I struggle with every time with shooting. I can't see what I'm doing. There we go. It's good enough. So this is a good baseline. And for this, you really do want to make sure that you're getting to the root of the hair so that you're not missing anything and that it's stretched out as much as it can be, because curly hair, you know, it likes to shrink up. It has its thing, you know, it likes to be short at times. So you want to make sure that you are really getting to the root. I should also say that I really like to do this when my hair is at its most stretched. Now in the back, sometimes I let my back part be a little tiny bit longer. I'm probably gonna cut all of this. And again, I'm just dusting it. I'm not going crazy. Boom, that's it. Now I'm gonna just step back and take a look and make sure that they're about the same length. And it looks like they are. Now this is starting to get like thick, so I'm gonna twist this up. This is actually really great to use as my gauge for length for the rest of my hair. So then I'm grabbing the finer tooth comb, being very, very gentle here, because like I said, it's not the easiest, and if it feels like it's catching a lot, I would just spray a little bit more water on it. This is pretty good. Sometimes I use this as my gauge. I'll just do that. When I did a bigger chop, that's what I did. But with dusting, just a very subtle cut, I prefer to use my hands. All right, now I'm measuring. I'm measuring it, and you can start to see the length difference. This is so hard to do on this side. And then I'm gonna take the hair that I did before and just match it up to see if I did a good job. Did not cut enough. Just cross-reference a little bit. I need to cut more. So look at that there. I do not want to go crazy because sometimes I get a little crazy and then I'm mad at myself for cutting too much. I think that's it. Now, sometimes when I cut it and it's still a little long on this side, I'll just freshen it up sooner. I'll cut it again a little bit sooner. Just the bottom, I'll trim it. So now when I do a side by side, you can see that it's pretty even. So yay, these two are done. This is when I start to do a little bit more layering. So as you can see, this is the lower part of my hair and this is a little higher up. So this is where I start to really think about how my hair is going to be shaped. And if you've been getting your hair cut by other people for a long time, oftentimes you already kind of have a nice little map of how many layers you want. If you don't like the way other people have cut your hair, you're going to want to start thinking, do I want long layers or do I like short layers? So the difference is long layers, you can have, there's a lot less deviation from the bottom to the top. So it's more of a slower gradation from short to long hair. Short layers is kind of like the ones I was talking about. And look, I have nothing against if you want it really short on the top and long on the bottom. That's cool. If that works for you, that's awesome. Like, I've seen it look really pretty on a lot of people. It just does not work for my hair, which is just finer. It just makes it look so thin. I usually do this and I look at how it falls. You can see that as I go, this is a little shorter and then it gets longer on the bottom. If I cut it straight like this, it's going to be too sharp. So I start to pull this hair back as I decide how much hair I want to cut. So I start to pull a little bit more from the top and then a little bit on the bottom. I lied to you, I lied to you. I pull from the bottom. So as I go, and because I want to create layers here, I actually pull a little bit from the bottom and I leave the top where it is. And what that does is it creates nice layers. You can see there's extra hair here. So that's going to create this part to be shorter at the top, and then you'll have this nice line. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. Notice too, you'll start to notice I don't cut directly against my finger. I cut a little away from it. So I'm actually going really conservatively. So sometimes what happens when I go to the hairstylist is I say I want to trim and I end up coming out with a full cut, like a full cut. I would go and get my hair cut generally like every 6 months, and every time I go, I could never grow my hair because they would cut so much that it would be starting over every time after I went to the stylist. So that's another reason why I stopped going. I like to have control over how much hair I get cut every time I go. So you can see that it's longer on the bottom and then it gradates up. You want to be very kind of conservative in the beginning when you're learning how to do this. Because the worst thing is you can always fix a mistake, but you can't go back and fix it if you cut too much. So always better to do less when you're starting out, and then you can start tweaking it as you go. A lot of times the back gets a little bit confusing because you don't want it to be exactly the same length as the hair in the front. At least I don't. So I often, kind of to put it into perspective, I move my hands backwards to actually see where it actually sits. So rather than just use this as a comparison, I look to see, okay, this is actually a little bit longer than I think it is. Go about that much. And then let me see, did I go crazy? Did I cut too much? No, that's pretty good. When I go to the side, it's actually, I don't know if you can see this, but it's actually a little bit longer in the back. Now that I'm getting further back, I also have noticed that on my right side of my head, I have a lot less layers. My layers on this side are so much nicer than the ones on my right side. So I just trimmed this already, and you can see that it's pretty sharp. Get closer. You can see it's pretty sharp, but some of the hair is higher up than down here. So I'm gonna start looking at this layering a little bit more, and what I do is I actually fluff it out like that. And then I see that this could be slightly bit shorter. So I'm actually gonna cut a little bit more off the top. There's, I think, some hairs here that could use a little bit of trimming. There. So that for me is like, I'm going with shorter, definitely a little bit more shorter layers on the top on this side, because I've had historically, I keep cutting this with less layers on this side, and I really want to make sure that I'm just better about that. The bottom of my hair is pretty much done. So now I'm going to start getting into the upper parts. So for this side, you'll see there's a lot up here, and then we're getting into the lower half. So the same rules are going to apply. You can see that my ends are actually pretty great. I mean, I'm telling you, if you cut just a little bit at a time, you won't have to worry about not being able to grow your hair out. Yes, it'll be slightly slower to get it to a longer length, but honestly, my hair is so much healthier. I cannot say it enough how good it is to cut your hair a little more frequently, but just less, cutting less off. This is when the layering starts to get really important, and when it's really good to be as strategic as you possibly can. I actually really love the layering on this side of my head. So I'm cutting practically nothing on this side. I don't want to trim it much at all. So I'm not even going to play with the way, like anything with, I'm keeping the exact shape. So when you want to keep the exact shape, just pull exactly as, like, almost as trying to keep the hair as taut as possible, and that's going to make sure that you're keeping the shape that you have. And then from here, I'm just going to do a trim, and I'm not cutting again close to my fingers. I'm actually cutting a little bit away from it. This is always really hard for me to do on camera, so I'm just gonna do it, come back. Once you have a shape that you really like, all you have to do is basically follow the shape. Unless you have hair that grows faster in certain areas or slower in certain areas, that's the parts you're gonna struggle with a little bit more. But once you have a general shape that you're loving, the rest of the process just gets so much easier. I think another great suggestion as you're learning to cut your own hair is to go online, go on Instagram, look at a lot of different women with curly hair, look at their shapes, look at the ones that you really gravitate towards the same way you would when you go to a stylist, and then really study the layering of the cut, the shape of the hair. That's gonna just help you start to realize what it is that you like. Think about how you want things to frame your face as well. A lot of times, actually, I'll talk about that more when I get to the bangs. So this is the side that I struggle with a bit. I don't know if you can see this, but the layering isn't all that much. There's some shortness here, but this part is definitely, like, there's too much length here and then shortness. So as I look at where my hair actually is going to be falling on my head, starting to think about how many more layers I want to have. So I'm only going to pull actually a little bit more from the bottom and then from the middle, but not too much. At this part, I want to keep taut because I'm really trying to cut a little bit more from the top. I want the bottom to be a little longer, so I'm pulling out a little, I'm pulling some from the bottom inward, shortening what's here, and then I'm keeping more on the top because I'm going to be cutting a little bit more from up here. I also like to just make sure that I'm not cutting full curls when I'm trimming my hair, because that's the hard part when we're trimming our hair, is that curly hair, you know, it curls up and then you might end up cutting way more than you actually anticipated. So always think about when you're cutting it that you're not trying to cut full curls. If you cut a full curl, you're going to end up with much shorter hair. And then I'm measuring it to see where it sits in relation to the rest of my hair. That's actually really good. And you see, that's a nice layer. You might actually want a little bit more. So I want a little bit more on the top. And you see, I'm not cutting a lot. There, that's a lot better. It's very easy to get misled when you're cutting your hair here. So you have to be very careful about where it's sitting, and you just have to keep kind of pulling until you can really see the shape. And I think I did cut a little too much on the top, but then you see, if I pull it out a bit, you can see that it's not too much, but there is a little piece here that's a little too long. Just slightly better, much better. Sometimes if I'm not sure if it's getting too off, it's just going the wrong, it's getting too off the shape, I take out the other side to just see where I'm at with my layers. Now, I did cut a little too much on this side, so now for balance, I'm gonna have to cut a little bit more on this side, which makes me sad because I really love the shape of this. The other great thing about curly hair is that because it's curly, you can make mistakes and it not be very noticeable, because the curls are usually different every time you wash it anyway, and how it sits will vary a lot. So you end up getting a little bit more permission to make mistakes. I'm getting into the back now. I save the front of my head for last, always. And this is where it starts to get a little more tricky, particularly this part. Like, well, most of this gets a little tricky. The worst is when you have really great full curls all in the front and then you turn your head and it's flattened out in the back. We all have it. It happens to everybody that curls just flatten out in the back a lot. So in the back, my layers tend to shorten a little bit more. So I have longer layers on the bottom and a little bit shorter layers on the top in order to balance that out so that my hair is not looking really flat in the back. And as I start to go up, I stop measuring it to the hair underneath because I want it to be a bit shorter. I usually just measure it more from side to side rather than from bottom up. I hope I'm making sense when I say these things. If I'm cutting it from this vantage point, I'm not getting a true sense of the actual length. So I want to go further back and then take a look at where it's going to sit and how it's going to sit, and just trimming the ends. So this side is actually really easy for me. Get closer, you can see here that it's pretty long on the bottom and it gets pretty short. So I'm having deeper layers on this side so that the back of my head is always really full. So when I go here, as you see, it's going to be a little shorter and then get longer. And when it's curled, it'll give me more volume. Now we're getting to the top of my head. Okay, so now making sure that I have these deeper layers. I just cut some. I wasn't recording, I thought I was. So I'm gonna pull some of this hair in because I want to keep that really long layer on the bottom. And I'm just gonna trim. And then once I'm done, I kind of pull it out and take a look and see. How are we doing? Did we do a good job? It looks a little crazy, but I swear in the end it looks really nice. Okay, that's perfect. So much shorter to much longer. Look how deep that is. And so then once again, what I said before, you want to look at how it's sitting on your hair in the back. And you can see that it's going to be very full. This is the only area that I do the kind of mullet-y, long on the bottom, much shorter on the top. It's the back of the head. So there we go. Now I will take this part and just look. How are we doing in relation to the bottom? It's a little long. I'm gonna cut one little more piece, just that tip off the bottom because I don't think I need it to be that long. Much better, because all of this hair is higher up than here. It doesn't need to be the same length. We want to keep some layers going on. More layers going on, I should say. But they're still very long layers. As you can see, like with the twisted hair, it looks like they're all roughly around the same length. But when I take it out, they're really not at all. Well, I'm gonna keep this part, keeping it for last. I will then measure these guys against each other. So you see on this side, I like the layers on this side. I'm actually gonna take this back out and just take a look to see how they fare against each other. Or are they similar? So, see, this is why I do this. You can maybe tell that the layers are not as sharp on this side as they are on this side. So I'm actually going to cut a little bit more on this side. All right, I think I'm gonna stop because it's not exactly the same, but it's very similar and I don't wanna get too crazy and then I cut too much. So like I said, go conservative, and it's okay. Curly hair is forgiving. So if it's not like exactly the same, that's okay. You can always, if you don't like something, you can always tweak it a little later. Knowing when to stop is going to be really important. It's so easy to get scissor happy. I mean, look at the professionals. No offense, professionals. A lot of you out there are amazing, but there are a lot of really scissor happy hairstylists. I've been to so many over the years. So it's easy to become scissor happy. It's easy to want to just do more and more, but then the last thing you want is to regret it that you cut too much hair off. So take your time, go slow, and be honest about how much you're doing, and always do a little less than you actually want. This is when it starts to get extra tricky. So I'm gonna twist this forward so I can actually see a little better what I'm doing. This is completely uneven. You see that? It's completely uneven. This is also the coarsest part of my head. This is actually where I've lost the most hair as well. I need to be very, very particular about how I cut it. I am using the fine tooth comb on this part, but I'm going so gentle because the hair is just coarser here and more prone to breakage. This in particular, I just cut it pretty much straight on, but let me see, what do I usually do? I separate, then I look this way to see where it's gonna sit, like how it's gonna fall. I don't think you can see this very well on camera, but it's really short here, and then it gets long. So sometimes I have like some split ends here as well, and I just want to be honest about cutting those split ends off. Okay, so we're getting to the front of the hair. We're getting closer. This takes time. You have to be patient. So I'm gonna start thinking about my bangs. And my bangs, I like to have long pieces around my face, generally. So I'm gonna save this part. Same rules apply here. I don't really have much more to say about this, so I'm just gonna cut them and come back. Again, I'm just measuring both sides, make sure they're not super uneven, being honest about where the hair sits. So this part's gonna be shorter because it's higher up on my head than this part. So don't start thinking it needs to exactly match this side necessarily. You wanna check the back as well. All right, we're to the front of my head. The first thing I wanna do is start to see what is actually my bang and what is actually my frame. So this is actually a little challenging. My bangs also go really fast. So I'm going to pull this even. There's a lot more hair on this side right now. I mean, I'm okay with that, but let's pull that. That should be on this side. So this is my frame. These are my bangs. Don't judge. My bangs are small, they're very thin because I had a lot of hair loss. Sometimes I pull more hair from the back to create a thicker bang in the front, but I'm not gonna do that today. I think it's filling out, it's growing in, so I'm just gonna I'm just gonna use this smaller piece in the front today. For the most part, this part is a lot like the rest of my hair. You see the length is actually pretty long. And I've said this a million times, I like the way it's shaped on this side, so I'm just gonna follow what I already have. Now, this is pretty good. I want it to be a little bit shorter. Again, this is a frame. That side, I'm gonna leave it out because I wanna see how it looks in comparison to the other side of my face. This part there's less hair here. And that's because it is growing in a lot, but I lost so much hair on this side. I mean, on both sides, it got a little, it got real there for a minute. I'm just gonna cut it at an angle. This side of my head needs more layers. So I'm making sure that every chance I get, I'm creating a little bit of a layer effect. Okay, that's pretty good. Measure it with the rest. It's a little shorter, great. Pulling it outward based on what's on the top to bottom in relation to top to bottom. Still not that much layer going on here, so I'm gonna cut a little bit more and see the relation to length. I cut more on this side, oops. So I will cut just a little bit off the bottom of this one. And then I'll take the most lowest part and just measure it out. And then I'll cut it. We are at the front, we're almost done. All right, my bangs start from here, back here. That's actually pretty far back. Back in the day when my hair was much thicker, I did not need to do that. I actually said earlier that I'm not gonna go too far back, but this is actually pretty far back. What I want to do is be very careful about the sides because like I said earlier, I don't want it to be really short around my face. I like my bangs to really frame my face. I look in the mirror and I look to see where the long parts are. The shortest part of my bang, this like center part, I start to separate them. I really want to be very careful about that. And then I'm not cutting a whole lot from the sides. I pull it outward and I start to see where there's kind of no shape. So I'm gonna cut a little bit more than I would normally from here. You see how long these are? This is when I have to start looking at the rest, at where else I did, what other work I did on the other side. So I'm gonna take this guy back out and take a look and see what's going on here so that I can have a clear sense of what I'm doing. And then there's not going to be a huge deviation from what I have on this to this. So there's like, when it's all out together, it looks like consistent, not choppy. So I'm going to, I think, trim a little bit more. I feel like this part of my hair is a little unhealthy, the part in the front. It has higher manipulation, and this side feels thinner, not as healthy. Look, there's this long piece here and a short piece here. Not a good sign for me, honestly. That means I've had quite a lot of breakage. That kind of makes me a little sad, but when you cut your own hair, you can start to see as well where you need to start adding a little more TLC. I have a tendency to take this part and pin it back, so I think why I'm having a lot of breakage is from using the bobby pin and pinning this back. That's why I have a lot of breakage here. This breakage is a little problematic because there's a part that's long and it's at the top, and the parts that are short are on the bottom. So, all right, I gotta figure out how I'm gonna fix this. Like I said before, if I see breakage, I really try my damnedest to fix it. But in this situation, I don't know how much I can cut. I am gonna cut a lot from this part on the top. This is already looking a little bit better, but I just cut like a full ½ inch off of this side to try to fix that hair loss that I'm having there. The best thing to do is find that center and then see if they line up, which these do. So I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop there. I'm not gonna cut anymore, even though I really could. This is probably the easiest part. Now, my measurement for my bangs in relation to how my hair shrinks is I do not want it to be any shorter than my nose. That's it. I had the misfortune of having someone cut my bangs at my eyebrows. So my bangs, when it shrunk, was like literally up to here, okay? I was freaking out. It was one of the worst cuts I've ever had in my life. And I looked like, basically I ended up putting really small rollers in it so that I had these tiny little curls going in the front. It gave it kind of, for, I don't know, kind of like a Grecian old school Roman vibe. I made it work, but I don't want to ever go through that again. So you can see that there's some pieces that are longer, and that's because I pulled a little bit more by accident, not intentionally, from the back of my head, and I'm okay. I'm going to cut all of this because I want my bangs to feel a little more full. So I'm going to take a look, and I'm going to cut just under my nose, right there. And my bangs grow fast. And I'm not nervous about cutting my bangs. I will cut a little further away initially, just to, you know, always cut a little further away first, and then see how you feel before you go and you do anything more, because less is more. So let's see, that looked pretty good. So now I'm gonna cut just a bit more, see how it sits. It looks pretty good. I'm gonna cut a tiny bit more. So I think that's as far as I'm gonna go. When I press down and my hair is stretched, it sits right at my nose. And when it's twisted or wash and go, it's gonna probably be right at my eyebrows. And that's where I want it to sit. So this is great. And then sometimes I take a look at the sides. See how the sides are longer? Because I put it all together. But this is going to be longer than this, but I still want it to kind of cascade, and you see how it does that naturally just by me putting it all in one. It does cascade a little bit around my face. And these are going to be a little bit shorter than ones framing my face, so that it doesn't feel like I'm going from this layer like this, exact layer like this. That's whatever always happened. They would do from here to here, and then when my hair was twisted, freshly washed, it was like all up here. So there was nothing here, and I despise that. So I'm doing smaller twists in the front. I always do smaller ones generally in the front. So I will show you what it looks like in a couple days, and you can see how it looks once it's fully done. I've got some fun things coming down the pipe. Like I said, that whole hair loss video, super excited to share that. I have a few other things coming up. Please stay tuned. Hey guys, so this is a finished product. I wanted to show you how the overall shape came out in the end. So you can see there's a lot of layers and I think it came out really well. My bangs are a little thin still. Really just wanted you to see the shape, and let me know if you have any questions at all, if I missed something when I was going through the process. I tried to be as detailed as I possibly could be. But yeah, thank you for watching. I will see you soon. Bye.